Tempora, history, myth, and legend.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that feels like it's straight out of a movie. We're talking about an uneducated orphan who literally used his razor-sharp wit to conquer the highly competitive court of a 16th century empire. We're going to be looking at the life, the myths, and the absolutely enduring legacy of Garlapati Ramakrishna, better known to history and to legend as Tenali Rama. Let's jump right in.
So here's a question for you. What if an empire's absolute greatest weapon wasn't a sword, but a joke? I mean, when we think of the mighty Vijayanagara Empire, we naturally picture these massive armies, towering temples, and grand kings, right? But as you'll see in this explainer, in the court of Emperor Krishnadevaraya, humor was actually a profoundly powerful tool. It was used for survival, for statecraft, and for speaking absolute truth to power.
Part 1. The Orphan of Tenali. All right, to really understand this legend, we got to look at his roots in the deltaic cradle of coastal Andhra. Ramakrishna lost his father when he was super young, which left him incredibly vulnerable. But what really shaped him was the intense socio-political landscape of the time. The sectarian landscape of the 16th century Vijayanagara Empire was fiercely competitive. His family was Shaivite, worshippers of Shiva, but the guys holding all the real power were Orthodox Vaishnava scholars, and they flat out refused to take this kid on as a student. So, denied a formal education, this brilliantly sharp kid was basically just forced to wander aimlessly.
Part 2. Laughing at Goddess Kali. Well, that wandering actually led to a divine encounter that would literally change history. Following the advice of a compassionate sage, the boy went to a temple on a new moon night to intensely worship Goddess Kali. And get this, pleased by his absolute devotion, she actually appeared. She manifested with 1,000 terrifying faces and countless arms. Now, anyone else would be completely paralyzed with fear, right? But Ramakrishna, he just burst out laughing. When a furious Kali demanded to know what was so funny, he cheekily told her he was just picturing her trying to blow 1,000 runny noses if she ever caught a cold. I mean, the absolute nerve. Actually, the goddess was so amused by his pure audacity that she just had to laugh herself. She then decided to test him, offering 2 bowls. In one hand, the sweet milk of wealth. In the other, the sour curds of knowledge. She told him to pick one. But instead, Ramakrishna quickly grabs both and just downs them. He argued, what's the use of being a scholar if you're broke? And what good is money if you don't have the brains to use it? Kali was actually super pleased by this profound wisdom and honesty, so she blessed him right then and there. She predicted he'd become a legendary comic poet, a Vikatakavi, in the court of King Krishnadevaraya. It's so cool to realize that the title Vikatakavi wasn't just some job description. It was literally a divine mandate to blend humor with really sharp, cutting wisdom. Part 3. The 100 Lashes Trick. Now, getting a divine blessing is one thing, but actually sneaking into an emperor's heavily guarded court, that is a whole different ballgame. Ramakrishna engineered this crazy, high-stakes infiltration by tagging along with a famous traveling theater troupe scheduled to perform for the king. But of course, the palace guards demanded a bribe at the gates. Having zero money, he struck a really dangerous deal. He promised the guards that whatever royal reward he got from the king for his performance, he'd split it perfectly down the middle with them. Greedy for gold, they let him right in. Once he was inside, his plan was pure chaos. Dressed up as a cowherd boy, he literally hijacked the stage. He completely disrupted the royal play. At first, the king thought it was pretty funny, but that amusement turned into pure, raging fury when the troop leader confessed they had absolutely no idea who this kid was. The punishment was immediate. King Krishnadevaraya sentenced the impostor to a very unique reward, 100 brutal lashes. But here is the spectacular comedic release. Right before the whip could strike, Ramakrishna begged the king to bring in those 2 gate guards. When they showed up, he revealed his promise to share his quote-unquote reward with them. The entire court just erupted in laughter as those corrupt guards were dragged away to take 50 painful lashes each. The king was so incredibly impressed by this brilliant stunt that he gave Ramakrishna a permanent seat in his court as one of the Ashtadiggajas, the 8 celebrated poets. Part 4. Shield of the Empire. You see, Tenali wasn't just a clown brought in for some quick laughs. His intellect became the Vijayanagara Empire's absolute best defense system against boastful upstarts. For example, there was this arrogant foreign scholar who challenged the entire court, claiming he had mastered literally every subject in existence. Tenali saved the day by bringing out this mysterious heavy bundle tied with rope, claiming it was the great obscure text to Lakashta Mahisha Bandhanam. The terrified scholar had never even heard of it and actually fled the city in the dead of night. The punchline? The book was literally just sesame and sheep dung tied up in buffalo hide. It was purely a genius play on complex Sanskrit words. His quick wit even worked for high-level diplomacy. When King Babur of the Delhi Sultanate heard about Tenali's brilliance, he invited him all the way to Delhi. Babur was so blown away by him that he showered Tenali with royal rewards. And when he returned to Vijayanagara, Krishnadevaraya was so incredibly proud of how Tenali represented their empire, he handed him an additional 10,000 gold coins. To put that in perspective, that was an absolutely astronomical sum back then. It completely cemented his high status in the kingdom.
But he also used his humor to protect everyday commoners from local corruption. There's a famous myth about how he outsmarted this super greedy merchant named Udhar. Tenali borrowed some silver pots from him, and when he returned them, he included a few tiny extra pots, claiming the originals had given birth. The greedy merchant happily accepted them. A bit later, Tenali borrowed the big, expensive pots again and just kept them. He went back and told the merchant they had tragically died of an illness. When the furious merchant protested to the court, Tenali just used the guy's own flawed logic against him. Hey, if pots can give birth, they can for sure die.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that Tenali Ramakrishna stood for humor with humanity and humor for humanity. In this highly structured, absolute monarchy, he was basically the ultimate weapon for the common man. He used laughter to speak truth to power. He ensured justice was served, all without ever sparking a rebellion. A real game changer.
Part 5. A Bittersweet End. As we look at the final chapters of his life, we really have to look past all the fun folktales and recognize the profound historical scholar behind the jokes. This supposedly uneducated orphan actually grew up to master 8 different languages. 8! He authored incredibly serious religious texts, most notably the Panduranga Mahatmyam, which is still celebrated today as one of the 5 great Telugu epics. He was a deeply religious guy who effortlessly navigated complex theological traditions, cementing a legacy that goes way, way beyond simple stories. And this perfectly captures his leap from history into myth. The man transitioned from being a real historical advisor to a literal folk hero. Even today, his enduring legacy inspires modern comics, animated series, and TV shows all across India. In fact, his stories are often the very first ones taught to kids to help instill logic, rational thinking, and an immunity to superstition. But, every human story has to come to an end. Tenali Ramakrishna passed away in 1528, which was just a year before the death of his beloved king. It's fascinating, really. The sources point out that this was a man who successfully cheated death sentences from powerful men time and time again. But in the end, he couldn't cheat Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. And the circumstances of his death? They carry this profound, almost dark, poetic irony. Think about it. The brilliant courtier who spent his entire life defeating the metaphorical snakes of the royal court, the corrupt officials, the boastful pundits, the treacherous enemies of the empire, ultimately died from a literal snake bite. It's a bittersweet end for a guy who literally spent his life turning the poison of others into nectar for the masses. Which brings us to a final thought to chew on. Tenali Ramakrishna lived during an era that was defined by brutal wars and shifting borders, and yet, centuries later, we don't remember him for bloodshed. He is immortalized entirely for his wit. It really makes you wonder, will history remember you for the battles you fought or the smiles you brought? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you found this journey as fascinating as I did.